So I decided to do a piston soak on a Scion TC. I was due to change the spark plugs anyway. They're 10 year or 120,000, and I was past both of them. I'm like 13 years and 125,000. Didn't really seem to have any problems with the spark plugs. Maybe it was like a little rough idle, but it might not even be due to them. So the first thing I did was I took the spark plugs out, and they don't even look terrible. I guess they kind of have seen better days. They kind of have some buildup on there. And I did measure the gap, and of course it won't focus. It did focus, and then it went away. But I measured the gap, and it was 0.48, I think it is. However it's measured, but it's supposed to be, or it's I think 0.048 maybe, is what it measured, and it's supposed to be 0.044. So it was a little thicker, and so I got them out. Of course, to get them out, I had to take the coils off, and it's pretty easy. It was just a 10 millimeter, I believe, socket to get the coil packs off, and then used that. It's just like a, you can't really see it, but there's a rubber piece in there that grabs the spark plug after you take it out. So if you don't have something like that, you can use a this has a magnet on it, and that will magnetize on the spark plug, and you can pull it out. But while I had them out, I figured I would do a piston ring soak. So down in each one of these holes where the coil packs and the spark plugs go, that goes right down in the combustion chamber. And you can see all four, and I just put these over top to keep dirt and dust from getting in there. But took the spark plugs out, so then you could see right down into the combustion chamber. And I used this gum out, or you could use seafoam. It's, you know, these are pretty much the same thing. And I poured, this is 16 ounces, and I did this twice. So basically, since there's 4 cylinders, I poured 2 ounces into each cylinder, and I actually took this off, but I had this hooked up to the crankshaft, and I couldn't connect it from the top because the crankshaft is on this side, and I couldn't fit this socket down there onto the crankshaft bolt. So what I did was, I'll get under the car and show you. Right there is the crankshaft pulley, and I just put this on there with my breaker bar, and after I got it on there, the crankshaft actually rotates pretty easily. It's the first time I ever had to do that, but this plastic wheel well thing actually worked out well, because it actually kind of was pushing the socket against the crankshaft bolt, and it kind of kept it there. And when I hung this from it, it just kind of stayed there, and I could turn it however I wanted. Now, one thing I'll say, when you get back up, I have this like little mirror with a pole, and when I take one of these out, I kind of just put this down there and measured how deep it was. So right now this is actually pretty far down, but if you rotate the crank, you can get it to they're all about the same length. Each piston is about the same level. For me, that happened to be, you know, about 2¼ inches from this part of my little stick. But I got them all to be about that level, because if they're too high, then you're not going to be able to fit much of that gum out fluid over top of it. But yeah, so I put 2 ounces in each one. I let it soak and sit there for a little bit. I would get under the car and rotate that breaker bar a little bit back and forth, to, because the whole point of this is you have piston rings. You have 2 compression rings on each piston, and then below that you have a oil, I think they're called oil control rings, but it's a ring that goes around that scrapes the cylinder walls, and it's supposed to take excess oil from the cylinder walls and transfer it through those rings, because the oil control ring has little holes on it, and the oil goes through those holes and into the piston basically, and back down into the crankcase. And these 2 AZ FE engines are notorious for those rings, the holes in those oil control rings were too small, and they would get clogged with like sludge or oil, and they wouldn't allow the oil to return back into the crankcase, and so you'd burn it in the combustion chamber instead. So I figured I would do a piston ring soak and try to get that gum out down into those rings and free them up and unclog those oil control rings. So I put those 2 ounces of gum out into each one. I measured it with a beaker the first time, and then, since my wife probably wouldn't appreciate me using like this oily gum out stuff in her kitchen beaker, I found this, and it's measured by ounces, and it has a nice way to dispense it into there using like a little funnel into each spark plug hole, so you're not dumping in like too much at one time. So after I had the 2 ounces in for a little bit, and I would, like, you know, rotate the crank back and forth a little bit over the course of a couple hours here and there, letting it sit and then rotating it again. Eventually they kind of went a little dry, and most of the stuff, you know, kind of went through the rings and down into the crankcase. So then before I went to bed last night, I poured 2 more ounces in each, and then I, you know, agitated a little bit with the, you know, breaker bar and the crank bolt, and then went to bed. And by the time I got up this morning, most of it had seeped through again into the crankcase. So I then just agitated the crankshaft again with the breaker bar just to make sure it was all good. And then what I did was I took these little you know, shop tail plugs out and just laid shop tails over it. And I disconnected the EFI relay, which goes right here. This is a 2009 Scion CC, by the way, and the EFI fuse right here, so I'm not getting fuel dumping into the cylinders when I try to start the engine. What else do I have disconnected? Obviously the coil packs, and I think that's it. I have that vacuum line off. I was just cleaning on top of the valve cover, so that's why that looks like that. But then I put shop tails over here, like I see, not in the holes but just laying across, and I would crank the car so that the pistons would go up and down and spray whatever residual fluid out. And I haven't done this yet, but I will. I have to put the new spark plugs in. Here's one of them. I got these really cool Denso Iridium TT, and they're not actually OEM, but Denso is the OEM manufacturer, Denso or NGK. They were both, depending on, you know, when you bought the car. But check these out. Hopefully it'll focus. It's like you have to play with it to, there we go. Look how much of a point each of them are. It's like iridium, and iridium, might be some platinum in there, and also the super expensive newer element, I think it's rudonium, or it begins with an R, but one of them is a mix of that rudonium too. I guess it's like a hybrid metal. Why this thing just wants to fight you to focus? But anyhow, you saw how it was very pointy, and like, it's like, how can you miss a spark with this? There we go. How can you miss a spark? Like, it's gapped at like 0.040, and stock is supposed to be 0.044, but it says it's the exact application for this vehicle, so I'm going to roll with it. And another benefit of this is that little hook that it's, I guess it's called the ground electrode, that you know, hooks over the spark plug there. It's actually very thin, so it impedes combustion a little less, because it takes up less kind of surface area or area in the combustion chamber, or volume basically. Because if you look at like one of the previous ones, you can see how it's like a little thicker. So it says it's one of like the thinnest ground electrodes, and you know, you could see how that would probably make a decent spark, but this one, nasty. It's just so pointy. Of course it focuses whenever it wants to. There we go. So how can you mess up that spark? How's it supposed to jump anywhere? It looks so good. And it's iridium. It's supposed to be good for 100,000 plus, and this car probably won't even last that long. So I'm going to throw these in there, put anti-seize on them, torque them to 13 pounds, hook everything back up, hook the coil packs back up, put the vacuum line back on. You know, all that gum out, probably all 16 ounces almost, seeped into the crankcase. So I'm going to let it idle and mix with the oil for a little bit. I won't put any load on the engine, but hopefully that kind of cleans the pistons from beneath them, kind of cleans the oil return rings maybe a little that way. So I'll run that for, I don't know, 10 or 15 minutes just idling, and then I'm going to change the oil. It's due for an oil change anyway, so I figured I'd do all this at one time. It'd be a good maintenance. I think that's about it. I'll let you know if it helps the oil burn. Honestly, oil burn has been a bit improved in this car. It used to be like a quart every 800 miles, but I ran some I forget. Oh, Auto-RX, which is an additive you put in the engine oil, and it works slowly over time. And I think that helped to partially unclog some of these piston rings, the oil control rings. I ran that 2 oil changes ago, and it seems to burn a little less oil now. But I figured I'd do this too, since I wanted to do spark plugs anyway. And what could it hurt? Hopefully, what can it hurt? But yeah, I'll let you know if it works and how much oil I'm burning now. Hopefully it's improved. Any questions, let me know. Like and subscribe. See you guys.